Hey everyone, and welcome back to Space Engineers. In today's episode, as promised, our focus is to build our first space explorer and leave this planet. This will be a pretty lengthy episode, and therefore I will avoid footage of me mining resources and welding. I will also use a bit of creative mode to speed up the guide on how to build the ship. Before we do that, however, we need to add two more things to our base. The Space Explorer will be mainly running on hydrogen, so it's a good idea to start generating hydrogen while we are building the ship, and that way we simply just need to transfer the fuel once the ship is ready. That means we will have to build a second oxygen generator next to this one here, and also a hydrogen tank next to that one as well. So let us add the oxygen generator to our toolbar, and let's do the same with the hydrogen tank. We should have enough with a small one, as it will be more than enough to fuel our ship. So for the oxygen generator, we can just build it next to the other one, and let me just put it in production and draw some resources. And we want to build it in such a way that the connectors join. And then for the hydrogen tank, we should grind away this block first, because once we place the tank instead, it will connect the pylon to the base again and power everything up. Now we can place the hydrogen tank here, and as you can see, it has two connectors on each side. So place it flat on the ground here, and that should connect it to the oxygen generator. And now we can just start welding these up. Once both are built, they can now generate and store hydrogen. We can now see how much it already has stored by opening the inventory and checking the control panel. The tank is already starting to fill up, and it has a capacity of 1 million liters. That's really not bad, as the tank we will be using for the ship will only have 500,000 liters, which means if this tank is full, we can fuel our ship twice. Now, to make sure we have enough hydrogen, we will have to go and collect some more ice, so I will have to go and mine for that. It is pretty simple to calculate how much ice you will need to fill up the tank. 1,000 kg of ice will generate 20,000 liters of hydrogen. So for 500,000 hydrogen, we will need to collect about 25,000 kg of ice. So that is what I'm going to be doing first. I'm going to go and mine some ice, and then I'll come back after that. Alright, this should now start to generate our hydrogen. So now we can begin with building our space explorer. We will need some space to build on, so let us expand the framework a little. I'm also going to add a ramp on the side here, so I no longer need to jump to get on the platform. Now, for the sake of the length of this tutorial, I will show you now how the ship is put together in creative mode. In creative, there is no need for welding, as every block will be instantly built, so it's going to be easier for me to show you how the ship is assembled. To start our ship, I prefer to build a little scaffolding to separate the ship from the static grid that is your base. Firstly, our Space Explorer will be built in a small grid, so it's simply not possible to straight connect the small grid to a large grid. Also, let's say you build the ship in a large grid and you connect it to the static grid of your base. You will then need to disconnect the ship once it's finished and then convert it to a ship. And while that is all possible, there does tend to be some issues still where both grids are somehow interlinked at times. So the best way to avoid this is to start building a landing gear like this. Now, we do not want to snap it to the large grid, as first of all it will become a large grid. We also want it to connect with the foot on the grid. So to make it small again, we can just press the number of your toolbar where the landing gear is in this case number 5. Some builders like to hold the landing gear above the grid and then drop it on the floor and hope it lands straight. But you can also snap the landing gear on the floor, then press the number again to switch the size of the grid. Normally, that should now place it upwards on the floor. In normal mode, you will of course need to weld it up first. On top of the landing gear, we can now build 6 cubes, and that should be enough for the size of our ship. Before we now start building the ship, I prefer to set up my toolbars. As I already know which parts I need, I will start adding all blocks to the toolbar. Let me switch over to the second toolbar by pressing Ctrl 2. Now open up the tool config menu and let's start selecting our building blocks. The first thing we need is a cargo container. We could take this one here and then scroll until we find the one we need, but as we only need one type of container, let us take this one here straight away. Next up is the hydrogen tank. We can just type the search terms to find it. We will take this hydrogen tank here. We also need a cockpit. For this ship, we will be using a fighter cockpit. The next parts are conveyors, so let us search for conveyors. We only need the angled conveyor, so there is no need to pick the whole selection. We're just going to take the curved conveyor tube. And we can do the same for the small ones as well, as we need 2 of them. Next, we want to take a drill. We also should pick some hydrogen thrusters, and as we need both sizes, we can take the one with the plus sign. We also need atmospheric thrusters, and let us add this one to the list. A survival kit on the ship is also a great idea, as it allows you to spawn back at your ship if needed. Let us switch to toolbar 3. In there we will place an O2 generator. We also need a connector for easy transfer and fueling. Next, we also need lights. We need batteries. A beacon. An ore detector. And something every vehicle needs, gyros. Never forget gyros. I'll also add another landing gear, as I will need that as one of the last parts. Alright, the list is complete. Let us activate our jetpack and start building our container. The container has 3 large connections on it, and the rest are all small. When building the container, we want to make sure that the 3 large connectors are all 3 in a horizontal line like this. Once I build it, you will see what I mean. Okay, so now we have one here on the left, we have one on the right, and on the center one here, we're gonna build a cockpit. So select the cockpit, snap it against the container like this. On the back, we're gonna build the hydrogen tank. We need to make sure that the hydrogen tank is connected with its small connector against the small connector of the container. The large connector should now point up and downwards. Next up is the large curved conveyor tube. And we need to make sure that it's directed in such a way it points away from the cockpit. We built one here, and we built one on the other side. We also need to build on top here, this time pointing towards the cockpit. The drill we can snap on the front of the cockpit, making sure the small connector of the drill lines up with the one of the cockpit. On the 2 remaining ports, left and right, we're gonna build 2 small curved conveyors, both pointing forwards. Now we can start with the hydrogen thrusters. 2 small ones we can build on the small conveyors here. And at the back we can build 2 large thrusters at the end of the curved conveyors. Now you will have to weld up the large thrusters before you can see the connector ports on the side. Once you've done that, on the 3 sides you can now snap small hydrogen thrusters, and we do that on the other side as well. On top of the ship, we can now place the survival kit. As you can see, one side has a large port, the other side has 2 small ports. Make sure that the large connector is lined up with the curved conveyor. On the small ports, we can now connect the O2 generator, which is in toolbar 3. When placing the O2 generator, be sure to line up the small ports with the small ports of the survival kit. On the bottom of the ship, below the cockpit, we can now place 2 batteries, which both can be snapped here and here. Remember, once again, I am building and creative. This means both the batteries and the hydrogen tank will start filling up. That is not something that will happen in a normal playthrough. Once the ship is built, we will have to move it and get it charged. Alright, now the batteries are done, we can move back to toolbar 2 and begin with adding atmospheric thrusters. Be sure to add the regular ones, as we need to build 4 of them on the side here, and of course the same on the other side. Then in front of that we can rotate another one and build it here, and the same on the other side. The same thing we can do at the back of the ship. Next to the conveyor we can build one here and one here. Finally, 2 more on the bottom here against the battery, which will serve as a left and right thruster. So now we have both hydrogen and atmospheric thrusters for great control. Now, if you're wondering why we need such large thrusters at the back, it is because this ship, once done, will be pretty heavy and we will need a lot of force to break free from the planet's gravity. So it's a good idea to install the large ones in the back. Okay, some final touches. On the bottom here, we will need to build a beacon. On the other side, we can build an ore detector. And next, very important, we're going to build 2 gyros here on the bottom. Now, it might not be important right now, but later in the game, when you learn about this, you can use the gyros for some useful stuff. For example, flip your ship around when stuck. So when building ships, I like to make sure that all gyros are placed in the same directions. So let us place them like this. 2 gyros will give a ship of this size a reasonable maneuverability. Oh, we also need to build the camera, almost forgot about that. Select the camera and place it on the connection here in front of the ship. It's pretty easy to see its orientation, as the word camera should be pointing upwards. Finally, we can build some extra lights so we have a better visibility. Take the spotlight, place one here and another one on this side. We're also going to add some small interior lights, one on each side of the ship, so we have a better view when we are flying through caves or digging in the ground. And that's it. That should be the ship complete. I don't think I missed anything. It's also possible to color our ship, but I would like to show you this in a separate example first, how it works. To change the color of a building block, we simply need to have a building block in hand. To change the color of the part in your hand, simply press P and then select your color. You can also use different skins. Once the color is selected, the part will now be built in that color and texture. To color existing parts, however, you need to use the part in your hand to transfer over the color. For example, I am now resting a black block on top of the floor below it. If I press the middle mouse button, the block below it will now copy the color over to the cube we had in hand. The color will be transferred over to the piece your block is resting against. For example, if I press it on the side here, then push the middle mouse button, the color is now transferred to there. Alright, let me reset the colors to gray again so I can show you the other button combinations. Once again, pressing the middle mouse button will just color a single part. If I however press Ctrl and the middle mouse button, you will notice how the color spreads further to the neighboring cubes. In this case, a radius of 3 by 3 by 3. If I use Shift instead of Ctrl and press the middle mouse button, it will now spread to 5 by 5 by 5. If you want to color the complete grid at once, simply press Shift, Ctrl and middle mouse button and all parts will have the same color. This is how coloring works. I prefer using the spray paint mod as it's pretty handy to reach even some hard to reach places. And I do hope they add this one day to the vanilla gameplay. Alright, we can now do the same to our ship. I will be using a building block again, select black, and now we can use that to paint the ship. Now you can simply color the cockpit black, or just color the whole ship black. I will add some quick accents to it, just using some yellow on the conveyor here, perhaps the drill, and on the other conveyor as well. Anyway, that is how you can add a little bit more personality to your ship and make it look pretty, at least prettier than this. Oh, I forgot to add a connector here, otherwise we can charge. So let me jump back to the normal save, where I in the meantime finished welding up the ship. To be able to charge and fuel the ship, we'll need a way to connect it. So let us build a temporary connector on the top of the medical room. Now this is all done, we should start setting up our toolbar and our engine groups. So let us hop in the cockpit, open up our inventory and switch to the control panel. Let us begin with grouping the hydrogen thrusters. There is a whole set here and 2 large ones as well. So let us group these as Space Explorer. And then let's call this a Hydro Thrust. And save. The next group is going to be the atmospheric thrusters. Select them all. Then name them Space Explorer Atmo thrust. And finally, we can group the batteries, again naming the group Space Explorer Batteries. The reason why I'm calling these groups with a prefix is so that it will be easier to find them back when all ships are connected to the same base. That way we can see a clear difference between vehicles and bases. And now we can set up our control/toolbar. So let us open up the config screen, open block tools, select the drill and drag that one in the last slot of the bar. Now open the groups, pick the atmospheric thrusters and drag them in slot 1 and select toggle block on and off. The same we can do with the hydrogen thrusters. Once again, select them and toggle block on and off. The batteries are next. Here we can select recharge on and off. Finally, we can add the connector and let us slide that one in slot 5 and select switch lock. In slot 4, we're going to place our landing gear later, which I still need to add. We could actually also add the hydrogen tank in the controls and have it control the stockpile on or off. That is going to allow us to refuel the ship when landed. Okay, now the ship is set up, we can now grind away the supporting pillar here as we won't need it anymore. I will leave the landing gear though, just in case I want to build something next time. We can just leave one block here and then weld that one up. And now we're gonna fly our ship and connect it to the connector. Okay, maybe this is something I should explain as well. The reason my ship is floating is that I kept the atmospheric thrusters enabled. If I had disabled them before grinding the pillar, my ship would have crashed and burned. Be sure to keep an eye out before doing this. So now the only thing we need to do is land the ship on the connector, switch the connector to lock on, set the battery to recharge and the tank to stockpile on. If you now check your control panel and you select the hydrogen tank, you can now see it filling up quickly. Alright, we also need a landing gear on the ship and we can build that now on the little block we just welded up. And of course, we also need to add that landing gear to our toolbar. So just pull that in slot 4 and select switch lock. Alright, that is our ship. That is all we need to escape the planet, at least for a short while. As the battery still needs to be charged more, I'm gonna jump into my miner, collect more ice, and that way I can start filling up my hydrogen tank again. But that is something I can do off screen, so I will be back once the batteries are full and ready to go. Alright, let us enable the engines, put the battery on auto, then disconnect our connector and let us lift off. Oh, my tank is still set to stockpile, so I don't have any hydrogen thrusters, so let's fix that. So, time for a disclaimer. Currently the ship only weighs approximately 30,000 kilograms, so the atmospheric thrusters have no problem keeping the ship afloat. But if the ship becomes much heavier, they won't be able to do that anymore, especially when coming back into the atmosphere and during the landing. If you come into the planet to land with a much heavier load, you should be sure to have enough hydrogen fuel to have extra downward thrust. If you noticed your hydrogen tank is empty and you did not manage to get any ice to refuel, you should reconsider re-entry with a full storage. The same is the case if you have empty batteries. That means your atmospheric thrusters won't have any power, which means your hydrogen thrusters won't be able to hold the weight. So be aware of that when you're coming back later. Alright, time to take off. I have my hydrogen thrusters disabled, as I only want to be using the atmospheric thrusters to lift off. The batteries are at 47 minutes, so that should be more than enough. To take off, just keep your ship level and press the spacebar to lift upwards. We only will enable the hydrogen thrusters once we want to break orbit. As long as we are in the atmospheric thrusters will have enough power. Once we go past 4,000 meters, the atmosphere will grow much thinner and the thrusters will lose power. Once that happens, we need to enable our hydrogen thrusters, tilt the ship straight upwards, and then engage the forward thrusters full blast. As you can see, we are starting to lose velocity, so enable the hydrogen thrusters, tilt the ship upwards and blast out of orbit. For the shortest travel distance out of planetary gravity, just line up your ship as vertically as possible compared with the planet. If you want, you can now disable the atmospheric thrusters as they have no use anymore, and that way they don't waste any battery power. Now, we are not out of the planetary gravity yet. We will need to clear the planet for about 40 kilometers, and that is when our planetary gravity will disappear. This means that as long as we are in this gravity well, we cannot slow down our ship, otherwise we will be pulled back down to the planet. There are ways to use thruster override settings so that you use your fuel a bit more efficiently, but to be honest, it doesn't make that much difference overall. We are currently at 90% of fuel, and I think we will be about halfway our tank once we break away from gravity. So one of the main goals will be to find some ice, then get the O2 generator fill up the hydrogen tank again. While we have a good view of the planet, it also is the perfect time to check out the terrain. There's actually an ice lake there, which is a great spot to perhaps move our base to one day. Alright, we are now at 20,000 kilometers and we're starting to see some asteroids appearing. You also might start to see some markers showing up. If they are red, that means these are pirates or factions that are not friendly to you, so be aware of that. Once we break the gravity well, we will be free to explore and fly around without being afraid to be pulled back. Of course, you cannot go fly back inside the gravity. For example, these asteroids are inside the gravity well, so visiting them is a bit more risky. It is strange, however, that these asteroids are not being pulled towards the planet. Feels a bit paradoxical. Alright, gravity is gone. We are now officially in space. Now, you might have noticed my ship is still slowing down, and that is because my inertia dampeners are still enabled. As explained before in my previous guides, the dampeners will always try to keep your ship in the position where it is, so the forward thrusters are slowing down the ship now. If you don't want this to happen, you can disable the dampeners by pressing Z and the ship will keep cruising on a current speed. Still, I would like to plan my trajectory first, so let me enable the dampeners and let us see if we can find some asteroids with some interesting deposits. I did forget to add the camera to the toolbar, so let us open up the toolbar config and add the camera to slot 6. In the menu, I will choose View. When I press 6 now, that will activate the camera, which now can be used to look around. It is also possible to zoom in and out, so you can have a closer look to the asteroids in the distance. Now, of course, the sun is behind the planet still, so some of the asteroids are in the dark. Normally, when deposits are on asteroid surfaces, you can see some discolorations. For example, iron will show up as orange or red, ice will show up as light blue, and so on. Oh, there's something there. I think that might be nickel. Let us go and check it out. To get out of the camera view, you just have to press F once, and that will get you back to the previous view. Be careful not to press twice, otherwise you will jump out of your ship. If you notice any red markers on the way, these will be enemy ships or stations, and if you get too close, they might attack you or send fighter drones, so be aware of that. If they are getting too close, it is smart to move away and find another location, especially in this ship, as we do not have any defenses. If the markers are like 5 to 6 kilometers away, you should be fine, but once they get closer, like 2 kilometers, they might start paying attention to you. Yeah, I think this is nickel. Let's go and fly a bit closer. Alright, this is nickel. I don't need it right now, but it probably will come in handy at a later point. So let me fly close up to it and add it to my GPS. So let's open the chat box and type /GPS asteroid nickel. That way I know the difference when looking for it, and it's easier to then disable the GPS markers later on. Alright, I'm gonna start looking for ice right now so I can start generating more hydrogen and recharge my tanks. As the atmospheric thrusters are not gonna do anything in space, I am depending on the ones with hydrogen, so we need to make sure we have enough fuel. Doesn't seem like there's anything there, so we're gonna have to look for another asteroid. Let's see if we can find some ice. So I think I might just fly towards that cluster of asteroids there, maybe we get some luck. To reduce the amount of fuel we are using, I'm gonna disable my dampeners again, then aim my ship towards the cluster, and we're gonna engage our boosters until we hit 100 meters per second. And then we simply can let the ship cruise without using any more fuel. Now it is best not to aim straight on an asteroid, but just to the side of it. Just in case you're getting distracted or you're not paying attention, we don't crash into the asteroid. As you can see, I'm now cruising at 100 meters per second and the engines are not engaged, which means I'm not using any fuel. With a bit of luck, we might find some ice there, refuel our hydrogen tank, and with that we gain more time to explore space. Once we get close enough, we can enable the dampeners again, which will slow down the ship. There is some nickel down there again. Oh, that is ice. Do you see it? Alright, let us go there and get some more fuel. Our drill is not enabled, so let's just press the button number 9 and mine some ice. So now the oxygen generator is going to start processing the ice into hydrogen and fill up our tank. If we check the control panel and our tank, you can see the tank is starting to fill up. We definitely should have enough to travel home when we need to. Now that we are here, we should mark the ice deposit just in case we need more. And let's explore the other asteroids while we're here. I think the better ores to find in space are cobalt, uranium and platinum, as they are pretty useful to build with. So also a great place to build an outpost or a station, for example. Now, the fact that there are no discolorations does not mean there are no resources or deposits there, but it's good to have a look around first and see if there's any clear deposits to be found. Oh, that's iron, and that's a pretty good spot. Perhaps there is even cobalt nearby. Well, this is a pretty good deposit, so let us mark this one as well. It is a good idea to build a large ore detector, as that has a wider radius to find ores nearby. And that's probably something we could focus on next time. We can even build one that can be linked to a small grid ship. Now, we could stay up here in space, just keep mining ice and keep our fuel going, but to make sure this is a complete tutorial, we should travel back to our home base and show you how re-entry works. I would like to remind you once again of your ship weight, as we need to take that in account when checking our battery and fuel level. The ship is now weighing about 50 tons, and the hydrogen fuel is at 27%. That means we should be okay to fly back into the planet with this weight and easily land. The batteries hardly were used, so the atmospheric thrusters should be fine as well. If you're getting really low in hydrogen, let's say you have only 5% left, you should first of all reduce your ship weight. But you can use that 5% to reach the planet without any trouble. Simply disable your dampeners, aim your ship towards the planet and approximate landing spot, and just engage the thruster until you reach 100 meters per second. Then you can stop thrusting and keep the ship cruising towards the planet. At a certain point, gravity will take over and will pull you towards the planet. This is going to take quite some time, so I would say enjoy the ride. While we are cruising down, I'm already going to enable the atmospheric thrusters, just so they are ready once I hit the atmosphere. I would also advise against walking away from the screen, because asteroids can suddenly pop up into your path and you will need to be able to adjust your course if that happens. 41,000 meters, we're soon gonna enter the gravity well. And there we are, gravity starts pulling us in, we can even see the speed is going to increase a little bit. Once we hit the 4,000 meter mark, we're going to enable our dampeners, which should make sure both the atmospheric and hydrogen thruster starts braking our speed. Alright, let's enable our dampeners and see when the atmospheric thrusters are kicking in. Okay, we're starting to slow down, so that's a good thing. Keep an eye on your speed. It is even smart to get your ship to complete standstill way before reaching the surface. That is going to give you more confidence to land. Almost there. Let us go down slowly. There is no need to rush now. And once the connector lights up, switch the lock. Let us turn off both the engines, put our battery on recharge, and also put the hydrogen tank back to restock. Ready for another journey next time. And here we are, back home. This was episode 4, and with that also probably the last playthrough guide like this. Next episode should be more focused on separate topics and more concise, I hope. This could be how to build a rover, how to build a mining rig, and so on. I hope you found this guide informative and gave you an idea how to travel to space. Maybe also gives you the confidence to try it out. If you enjoyed this guide, I would appreciate it if you press that thumbs up, and I will see you again next time. Safe travels, Beeblebum out.